Then the next part of respiration, that is mechanism of respiration. We have seen respiration is a biological process which involving exchange of gases between atmosphere and lungs and vice versa, and that results into formation of ATP. This mechanism of respiration includes breathing, external respiration, internal respiration, and cellular respiration. First, breathing. What is a breathing? It is a physical process in which gaseous exchange takes place between atmosphere and lungs. It involves inspiration, that is taking in gases taking in from atmosphere to lungs, and expiration, that is expelling out gases from lungs to atmosphere. Both these steps, they are carried out by thoracic cage, ribs, sternum, and intercostal muscles and muscles of diaphragm. The movement of these, that is the movement of thoracic cage, the movement of ribs, sternum, intercostal muscles, and muscles of diaphragm, that carried out this physical process, and with the help of these, the inspiration as well as expiration takes place. What happens in inspiration? In inspiration, during inspiration, the atmospheric air is taken into the lungs. It occurs due to the pressure gradient formed between the lungs and the atmosphere. It is an active process in which the diaphragm becomes flat and goes downward. The external intercostal muscles contract, so the ribs and sternum moves upward and outward, and that results into an increase in thoracic volume. There is increase in thoracic volume and decrease in pressure of thorax, and the decrease in pressure of thorax and lungs. To compensate this, the low pressure inside the lungs, air from atmosphere rushes into lungs via nose. This is known as inspiration. That means due to differences in pressure gradient in lungs and atmosphere. Atmospheric pressure is more and the pressure in lungs is less, therefore atmospheric air rushes into lungs, that is known as inspiration. Then what happens in expiration? Expiration is exactly opposite to inspiration. During expiration, the thorax contract, that is due to the movement of ribs, sternum, etc., and that causing air to be exhaled. That means the air which is present in lungs, they expel outside the body. The diaphragm relaxes and is pushed upward. It becomes dome shaped. The intercostal muscles also relax, pulling the ribs cage inward and downward, and this causes a decrease in thoracic volume and leads to increase in pressure. Here there is a decrease in thoracic volume. What happens in inspiration? There is increase in thoracic volume and there is decrease in pressure, while in expiration the exact opposite. There is increase in pressure in thorax, and that results into the lungs as compared to atmospheric pressure, so air from the lungs rushes out, that is known as expiration. One inspiration and one expiration is known as one breath. One inspiration and one expiration is known as one breath. In second, external respiration. It is also known as exchange of gases at alveolar level. We have seen that alveolus is the smallest unit of respiratory system. These are present in lungs. They are like grapes. An alveolus consists of a layer of simple squamous epithelial resting on a basement membrane, and it is associated with a dense network of capillaries. The capillary wall is also made up of simple squamous epithelial resting on thin basement membrane. Both the layers have similar structure and are thin-walled, and therefore they allow the exchange of materials. The wall of blood capillaries and all of alveolus, they are thin-walled, and through this all the exchange of gases, exchange of materials takes place. Together they work as the respiratory membrane through which gaseous exchange occurs, that is between the alveolar air and the blood. Diffusion of gases will take place from an air of higher partial pressure to an area of lower partial pressure until the partial pressure in the two regions reaches equilibrium. What is meant by partial pressure? The partial pressure of carbon dioxide of blood entering the pulmonary capillaries is 45 mmHg, while the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in alveolar air is 40 mmHg. That means the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is less in lungs and it is more in pulmonary capillaries blood. Due to these differences, carbon dioxide diffuses from capillaries into alveolus. Similarly, partial pressure of oxygen of blood in pulmonary capillaries is 40 mmHg, while in alveolar blood it is 104 mmHg. And due to this difference in oxygen partial pressure, that oxygen diffuses from alveoli to capillaries. Then third one, that is internal respiration. The two main components of blood involved in transport of respiratory gases, that is carbon dioxide and oxygen. These two main components are RBCs and plasma. First, there is transport of oxygen and the next one, that is transport of carbon dioxide. First, that is the transport of oxygen. Of the total oxygen transported, only 3% is transported in dissolved state by the plasma, and remaining 97% is bound to hemoglobin, that is Hb, which is present in RBCs. We have seen in circulation in blood, RBCs, they have a respiratory pigment that is known as hemoglobin. Hemoglobin act as the respiratory carrier. They act as the oxygen carrying molecules. It has a high affinity for oxygen and combines with it to form a compound known as oxyhemoglobin. Theoretically, one molecule of Hb has 4 Ap plus, each of which can pick up a molecule of oxygen O2. Hb plus 4O2 gives Hb4O2. Oxyhemoglobin is transported from lungs to tissue where it radially dissociates. Oxyhemoglobin is a radially dissociable compound, and therefore when that oxyhemoglobin reaches at tissue level, here that get dissociate into again Hb and O2. O2 is released, then that O2 enter into cytoplasm. However, the degree of saturation of Hb with O2 depends upon O2 tension, that is PpO2. 100% saturation is rare. Maximum saturation of 95 to 97% is at PpO2 in alveoli. Degree of saturation decreases with the drop of PpO2. This begins the dissociation of HbO2. At 30 mmHg of PpO2, only 50% saturation can be maintained. The relationship between HbO2 saturation and oxygen tension, that is PpO2, is called oxygen dissociation curve. This oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is a sigmoid curve and is shifted toward the right due to increase in H plus ion concentration, increase in PpCO2 and rise in temperature and rise in DPG, that is 2,3-diphosphoglycerate, formed in RBCs during glycolysis. It lowers the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. Then Bohr effect. It is the shift of oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve due to change in partial pressure of CO2 in blood. And what is the Haldane effect? Oxyhemoglobin functions as an acid. It decreases pH of blood due to increase in number of H plus ions. HCO3 minus ion changes into H2 and CO2. In the alveoli where PpO2 is high and PpCO2 is low, oxygen binds with hemoglobin. But in tissue where PpO2 is lower and PpCO2 is high, hemoglobin does not hold as much O2, and that results into dissociation of oxyhemoglobin into hemoglobin and oxygen. It releases O2 for diffusion into tissue cells. In second part of internal respiration, that is transport of CO2. We have seen how oxygen is transported from lungs to tissue and carbon dioxide is transported from tissue to lungs. Then the transport of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is readily soluble in water and is transported by RBCs and plasma in three different forms. A. By plasma in solution form, that is 7%. B. By carbonates ion 70%, and C. By red blood cells 23%. First, by plasma, only 7% of carbon dioxide is transported in a dissolved form as carbonic acid, which can break down into CO2 and H2O. Second, that is by bicarbonate ion, which occurs nearly 70%. Nearly 70% of carbon dioxide released by the tissue cells diffuses into plasma and then into the RBCs. In the RBCs, CO2 combines with water in presence of Zn containing enzyme carbonic anhydrase to form carbonic acid. Carbonic anhydrase enzyme is found in RBCs and not in plasma. The rate of formation of carbonic acid inside the RBC is very high as compared to its formation in plasma. Carbonic acid, being unstable, almost immediately dissociate into HCO3 minus and H plus ions in the presence of enzyme carbonic anhydrase, leading to large accumulation of HCO3 inside the RBCs. It thus moves out of RBCs. This would brings about imbalance of charge inside the RBCs. To maintain the ionic balance between the RBCs and plasma, Cl- diffuses into RBCs. This movement of chloride ions is known as chloride shift or Hamburger's phenomenon. HCO3 minus that comes into the plasma joins to Na plus or K plus, forming NaCO3 or KCO3. These H plus ions might be expected to lower blood pH, but they are buffered by hemoglobin by the formation of deoxyhemoglobin. At the level of lungs, it responds to the low partial pressure of carbon dioxide of the alveolar air. Hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions recombine to form carbonic acid, and under the influence of carbonic anhydrase yields carbon dioxide and water. Then the third type, that is by red blood cells, which occurs in nearly 23%. Carbon dioxide binds with the amino group of the hemoglobin and form a loosely bound compound, carbanohemoglobin. These molecules readily decompose in region where the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, that is PpCO2, is low, releasing carbon dioxide. Then cellular respiration. It is the last step taking place inside the cell where food is oxidized and ATP is generated. It shows two steps: oxidation and phosphorylation. What is oxidation? Oxidation means breaking down of complex organic molecules into simple inorganic molecules with release of heat. For example, glucose C6H12O6 plus 6CO2, that gives 6CO2 plus 6H2O and 686 kilocalorie of energy. Now what is phosphorylation? It involves trapping the heat energy in the form of high energy bond of ATP molecules. ATP is used to carry out vital life process and so is called energy currency of this. The formation of ATP takes place with the help of ADP, that is adenosine diphosphate plus inorganic phosphate plus 7.3 kilocalorie of energy. Then the last part, that is regulation of breathing. That means how the breathing process is regulated. Respiration is under dual control, nervous and chemical. Human adult breathes about 12 times per minute, while a newborn it breathes about 44 times per minute. Normal breathing is an involuntary process. Steady rate of respiration is controlled by nervous system. The location in pons and medulla and are known as respiratory centers. It regulates the rate and depth of breathing. It is divided into three groups: dorsal group of neurons in medulla, ventral lateral groups of neurons in medulla, and pneumotaxic center located in pons. Modified respiratory movement, then artificial ventilation, ventilator. These parts are deleted in new syllabus.